Hello and welcome to another episode of the Storied Arcs podcast. Today we are happy to bring you another creator interview, this time with Justin Madson, creator of works such as Breathers, which we just spent a couple weeks discussing. If you want to support Justin, the best way is obviously to buy his books, but visit justmadbooks.com. You can buy original prints, send in commissions, or buy his other books, like Carbon and Tin Man mentioned in this interview. All of his links will be available in our episode description, as will our links, so feel free to look around those as you listen, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Hello, Justin, and welcome to the Storied Arcs podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, we have a lot of questions to get into, especially with Breathers, but we always like to start all our interviews by asking, what is your comic origin story? How and why did you start drawing and telling your stories?
Okay, so started in high school. I was a big comics fan, as well as two of my friends were as well. And I guess senior year of high school, we decided to make our own comic where we each did like an 8-page story, and then just ran photocopies and stapled it together. And I think we kind of just gave it out to people at that point.
Nice. Any particular genre you're working on at that point? Was it like the slice of life type stuff that you do now, or was it like superhero?
Mine was more like a really weird fantasy kind of story.
Nice. In 8 pages.
Yeah. Well, it was like an ongoing
thing.
So we did a few more issues after that. And
what kind of books you're reading? Like what when you and your friends there, what were your influence? I mean, did those directly influence the kind of stories you told, or were you just branching out on other stories that interest you? But what kind of books were you reading then at the time?
Well, I think I was pretty much into like the Vertigo stuff at that point. And yeah, I started out as a big like Image fan.
Okay.
Yep.
Sure.
I kind of burned out on that and got into more of the darker stuff, and then the more indie stuff after that.
All right. So so by that sense, it seems like Vertigo, it's a DC, an imprint of DC, but still it's still viewed, especially at that time. I'm assuming the time we're talking about is into the early parts of Vertigo, late 90s, and yeah,
exactly.
That's all still considered, I think. I mean, maybe not creator owned, but it's all has the independent mindset. So were you always on that path there? Was there not a lot of like mainstream Marvel and DC stuff? Not really.
Okay. No. Never really got into the
saved a lot of money
stuff.
And you skipped a lot of like what's a nice way to you skipped a lot of filler issues.
Look,
I think that's my main thing.
If you're going to miss a time, I'm assuming that the 90s were, I don't want to say forgettable, but they pretty much were I mean, Marvel was going through it with their bankruptcy. There were some tough times there.
America put all its energy into sitcoms in the 90s.
Yeah. So probably not the worst thing there. So your comic influences in terms of how you found, I guess, your style and in terms of the kinds of stories that you wanted to tell, was that just in like an iterative process of you just deciding to keep doing it, and then you land on something that feels comfortable for you?
It pretty much was, yeah. I mean, I never stopped once I started, even like going through college, and then after that, I was always producing something. It wasn't great, but I was still churning out something and running photocopies of my books and trying to just get them out to whoever.
Were there places that you would specifically try to target to try and distribute stuff, or was it like you like busking on street corners and school
it was
and things
kind
like
of the
that?
Crapshoot, really. Yeah. There were some like online forums and stuff where people would be interested in that kind of thing, but
sure.
It was a struggle for sure, but
yeah.
It wasn't really about selling books at that point. It was
sure, yeah, but I'm getting them out there, right?
Creating something,
yeah. So this isn't even on our scripted question, so don't feel free to cut me short. But it seems like you have some relentless hustle to you. If it starts with photocopying and distributing your own comic, in addition to conceiving of it, drawing it. I guess you were probably black and white back then, but still writing it, drawing it, illustrating it, printing it, distributing it, and really like the story of Breathers when I read like this is when the first like black and white issue came out, and then here is the final product in a Dark Horse bound book in like 2023. It's
No,
like,
it's been quite a journey.
yeah, I mean, can you just give us like even like a 10,000 foot view walkthrough of that? And like, was it once you had it finished, was it still high priority to get it done, or were you working on other things and were like, yeah, I'll just keep the ball rolling on breathers as I go?
Well, I was pretty much just solely working on breathers from when I started. So I started in like 2007. I did the zero issue first, which is in the back of the
Mhm.
collected
Yeah,
Dark
got
Horse
Yeah.
well.
version.
Oh yeah, I was like,
Oh,
I
you
also
have
have it.
the,
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
So yeah, that was kind of like I wanted to kind of dip my toe into the
yes.
world of breathers with
Mhm.
that before I started like the longer
Yeah.
series. So
Which Alex blindsided me when we podcast. I didn't realize that character. I thought it was just like a story from the world of breathers. And then I was like, oh shoot. I think Alex, you got it like your
Yeah,
first
yeah,
pass. Like that's his
that's
friend. Yeah.
yeah, that's Toby's friend there that he meets
yeah,
him. That he has one scene in the coffee shop with him, and then
right.
we don't see him again. And I guess this is why. Is
Yeah,
that narratively timeline wise? Is that where it's supposed to fit? Does he leave the coffee shop and then some point after that happens?
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess I'll since you mentioned that zero issue and how you worked on it, I'll skip down to one here about um just the nature of the storytelling in Breathers, which is these, it starts off as these, even if we include that zero issue, it starts off as these small kind of almost like 8-ish page stories that are all that are all separate, but they're all obviously in the same world. And then they start interconnecting. They start kind of weaving together to become the one larger story. So when you started working on this, including back into that zero issue, did you have an idea of what these different elements were, or were you just writing down ideas in the world and then blending them together?
Um, I think when I started, it was kind of just, I had a few ideas and yeah, it was a nice way to work, breaking it up into these smaller sections where I could just, tackle an 8-page story and then, kind of reconfigure or whatever for the next part. It takes a lot of energy to make comics.
Yeah, I would
So it's
imagine.
nice
Yeah.
to, do a little bit, take a little break, do another, 8 or 10 pages.
So
And then once I got going, the story kind of, took more of a shape.
okay, all right.
I didn't
Were
have a
you
grand plan initially.
okay? All right. Yeah, that was where I was going to ask if it was
Yeah,
a matter of as you saw them melding together, you kind of piece your way through it. But did you feel
yeah.
anything as you're working and as you're seeing it come together, think because you didn't have some like you didn't have some idealized goal at the end as you're working towards what became your goal? Did you feel any, I don't know, pressure as a storyteller to be like, well, now I got to go back and now that these started to connect, do I need to make more things connect? Do I need to, I did this thing early on that just seemed random and now like it can have meaning. Like, did you have anything like that where you're thinking, well, now that they are connected, like they really have to be connected now? Did you feel any of that? Or was it just however the story went, you try to keep to that?
I, it just kind of happened naturally for the most part. I think, um, I never got too far away from a place where I could, tie it together. You know, the further I went, the more I was thinking about how it would all come together in the
Okay.
end. Try
All
not
right.
to get the train too far off the tracks,
Don't try to get
Yeah.
which
Well,
too
which
far
is
ahead of
easy to
skis. Yeah.
do, but
I
yeah,
would
right.
imagine. Yeah, I can. Yeah,
But I think
without an endpoint. Yeah, I'm sure
yeah,
you could find yourself down a lot of meandering and
right.
places where you look back and you have no idea where you started from. I
Yeah.
can see that.
And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
and that like challenge to sort of like make it all make sense is
Hmm.
kind of the fun part of it in a way.
Hmm.
Like
Throw the pieces out
you
there and then
back yourself into a corner and you're like, oh, okay, I gotta make some sense out of this. So
yeah. Well, the sense of connection between the stories that I find most impressive are, it's really easy for like, oh, we've been following these characters and oh, they bumped into each other on the street and now like technically they're connected, they cross paths, but they cross paths in more subtle ways. And I think there's like a 3 or 4 page exchange, which I'll just slap up on the screen. It's page 256 in the Dark Horse edition for anyone following along at home. But it's just like a perfect sequence, not just because of how it reinforces the world. So yeah, it's got him handcuffed to the wall, shoots the window, and like everything happening in this moment is one, we've been to that group of deniers, and we ourselves like haven't actually, as the reader, 250 pages in, seen evidence that the virus is in fact real. So there is like a little bit of the reader starting to ask, like, well, is this real? Will anything happen to them if they step outside? Because we know the one girl is going out and we don't know why. Toby's starting to get curious, but his girlfriend is like very pro mask. But then it turns out she's pro mask because it helps hide an injury to her face. And it's like, okay, well, everyone kind of has their motives for playing their moves. And here your villain straps someone to the wall, shoots the window. And so, one, it gives us that lived in feeling of like, oh, these characters are so familiar with the boundaries of this world that they can use the mere air as a weapon and a threat and a taunt now. And two, as soon as the glass shatters and he dies, you realize, okay, this is real. And now we're ahead of Toby again. Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, just hats off, because I feel like that's it's the perfect intersection, not just of like characters and where they are, but like now both stories are playing off of each other and the reader's having a separate experience from any of the characters. And I don't know, is that one that just was kind of happy the way that it fell together, or was that like a big moment?
Sure.
That was it a big moment in your mind? I guess it's my question.
It was, yeah.
Okay.
It was. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because I was like, that was what hit me the hardest in terms of like, it felt like a big reveal.
Yeah. And it was like, why, Marsh could have just shot him right there, but
what's the fun in that?
why not use
it's like in that moment,
deadly air.
Yeah, in that moment, the gun isn't the threat, in the way that we think of a gun as a threat. The gun is simply a tool. Because I mean, I guess also he could have opened the window, but like you could have shut it. But yeah, it's the same thing. The gun, pointing the gun at him isn't the threat that we think it is. It's what he does with it, which is not shoot him, which is what any of us would think in our world.
That'd be too easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we can take it a step further. So you said that was an important moment. I'm thinking about it, is that because that changes the reader's relationship now with the story, because as Mike said, now we now know that we know what some of the characters have definitive proof of, which is seeing someone die from the air, which is what Juliana has seen now, and what we know
most people had just heard, and they've
grown up
their whole
with
lives.
They're being told this, and so they said. So does that change in terms of how you then dole information out from there through that? Because that's what you said, Mike, was 256 something.
256, yeah.
And the book is like 440, something like that. So maybe you're just past about half in terms of the bound edition.
You're on the downward slope, yeah.
Yeah, but you're just about you're just about halfway through there, and so they said that changes the reader's relationship to the story. In your mind, as the creator now, as you're going forward from there, is that something that you're aware of in terms of how you dole information out, in terms of what you're having your characters in the story say and act, knowing that we, the reader, now have, like, we have the full omniscient knowledge of, like, we know what's going on, so we know anyone who would, we know at that point when Toby has that moment of like, maybe I'll go outside, and he does.
Yeah,
he doesn't take a breath, but when we see that, we know if he does that, that's not going to end well.
Yeah. So
versus if that were earlier,
to set that up, definitely before then. Yeah. It's weird. It's hard to, kind of see it from a reader's perspective in a way sometimes when you're writing, but
especially when it's written over that. I mean, because, if you were at Image, right, this would have been a 9-month project. Maybe they would have split it in half, and you would have had a hiatus after 5 or 4. But you would have been on, you would have been cranking it out at an inhuman pace. I think it's a fair way to, like, we talked to a guy named Will Morris, who did a book last year called Gospel that was 5 issues that he penciled, inked, colored, and lettered.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, I saw someone say that they like penciled and inked 2 pages today, and that was like a really good day for them as a professional comic artist. And I was like, so like, what was your pace, when you wrote this book? And he said, a lot longer. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. He was not willing to disclose how long 5 issues took him to make.
Uh,
Um, so, yeah, I was like, yeah, it's no small project, and you seem to take your time with them too, because you get creative with paneling and everything else. It's one thing if you say, okay, I've got, the 3x3 or 3x4 grid,
mhm.
and we're just gonna, you can kind of do quick vignettes and keep the story moving at a really good clip.
Yeah.
But it seems like you brought, fresh eyes to each page as you sat down,
Yeah.
which takes longer.
I think I did.
Um,
So you mentioned how, it can be hard either as a creator when you're in it and looking back to view the book as a reader would look at it.
Mhm.
But Breathers now, obviously, in the world that we live in now versus when it first came out,
Right.
it's impossible for a reader now. I believe that totally. It's impossible for anyone to
Mhm.
read this book now and not think of real world comps that obviously did not exist in the same level when you first wrote the book. So as it's now, so we're recording this now in March 2024. The bound edition from Dark Horse came out about 6 months ago in October 2023. So it's been out there. But what has that been like for, I guess, more people now to experience and read this book, knowing that the context around it, like I said, whatever you had in mind initially is just obliterated. And I know you had a little note at the end there about how, the themes and things you talked about just they were really completely all fiction at the time, but now they're so concrete. So what has that experience been like seeing this work that is significantly older than the world we live in now, our experience of the world, and just seeing that, knowing that any reader that comes to it is gonna bring the same, I don't know, emotional trauma or baggage to it that
Right. Right.
and know that that's going to inform how they read the book.
Yeah. I think, when I first did it, it held some dramatic and traumatic effect for
Mhm.
some people, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
sure.
Now it's, obviously a lot more.
Yeah.
It's more relatable, I suppose.
Is it I mean, do you, as a creator, I think something that Mike and I talked about is the idea of, I think we related to music a little bit, of like how an artist can write a song and it obviously has meaning to them, and then it can go out in the world, and then outside forces can take that song and now it's only heard in one context, which is maybe not, probably not at all what it was written for. But now
Yeah.
anytime they sing it or perform it, the artist now has lost control over that, because that's the only context someone thinks about it. How do you feel as a creator, knowing that your story kind of got, in a way, it got co-opted by COVID-19 and 2020, and in a way you can't reclaim it and be like, well, listen, it was meant, what you weren't
Yeah.
trying to mirror real world events, and then all of a sudden you
Right.
look, prophetic in a lot of ways in terms of how many things you nailed in terms of how our society would something like that. So how do you feel? Does that sit okay with you, or are you someone
Uh,
that can let that go because your creative process, or
yeah. I mean, I can definitely let it go.
okay, yeah,
Yeah. People have, you know, I don't know that I could have, I couldn't write it now. Like it would be a totally different story. So
yeah.
like, I'm glad I was able to write it when I did.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't know. I think just the way it came together, I just thought really hard about like what it would actually be like to live in this world where you can't breathe the air.
Yeah.
Like after we've, gone through whatever happened that was
Mhm.
terrible. And now years later, we've adapted to it. Life goes on. And I just really thought like what would be in this world, to make it feel realistic,
Mhm.
even though it wasn't at the time.
Yeah. So as 2020 and then the subsequent years were happening, and the same sort of things. Maybe not the exact same kind of conspiracy theories, but the same ideas start get propagated in the real world? Is it like, as the time went on through 2020 and on, was there like a checklist in your mind, but like, well, that happened, that happened, that happened? Because it seemed like so many of those things, all the way down to them finding a vaccine for this, so people can go out and breathe and live more closer to a quote unquote normal life as it was before. But was it just it seems like as you read the book, you can just check off, be like, well, that happened in our world, that happened, that happened. It was just one after another. So I mean, did you have a sense of that as the world was happening around it? Were you thinking back to your own book at that moment?
Yeah, initially when we'd see people wearing masks at the grocery store and stuff, had a very surreal feel, and had a lot of people being like, oh, this is like breathers. Oh, like breathers.
Right.
Like,
Well, and
yeah,
then you had people questioning
is.
the masks and then questioning the virus.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not just the surface level thing, which it kind of leads me to one of my questions is I think, like Alex was saying, we've lost control out of how people interpret this, other than when I've handed this book to people, I'm always like, he wrote this before 2020. Like,
That's
just
what I tell people too.
Yeah.
When I'm at shows and stuff.
We try to make that when we in our intro, make it very clear. Like, we understand when you read this, you'll think of this, but the context is before 2020. So everything that was here was done and written. It was final before then. To try to keep that in mind, even though at some point as you're reading it, said as a reader, like that just goes out the window, because
go there.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
Although, I mean, I was trying to think back to, you were challenging me to remember the conspiracy of the day, because I think in like 2007, that's even before the housing bubble popped.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, if I think back to like the art, the music and the movies and shows and comics of like 2005, 6, 7, it was a lot about, fear mongering and war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
We were still post 9/11 shadow, really.
Sure. Yeah. So it's the long shadow of like 9/11. And this is a weird sentence, but I'm going to go for it. It felt refreshing. I imagine it would have felt refreshing to read about a different kind of disaster. Because and this is my question, is that I think people read this and they think, wow, he really called it. There's an airborne virus, there's a government shutdown, there's factions of people, there's pockets of conspiracies. But as I read this book, I take it first and foremost as it's about people. It's about like the characters, their connections, how they relate to the world. And the world is not to downplay it, but it's merely the setting.
It's the backdrop.
Right.
And that's
which means it could have been any other. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the piece to reclaim here. And I think that becomes very clear when it's like, that's like 400 plus pages, and you can kind of count all the characters on two hands, basically. Yeah. All the characters that you're going to like really spend time with, meaning it's not just constantly expanding the world and cast of characters. It's like, no, we're really honed in on a handful of people here. Okay. Well, that's really great to hear that it wasn't just, you had a wild conspiracy and here, let me put some people in it. It was the other way around, which is exactly how I read it.
Yeah, no, it was, I wanted an element to sort of tie everyone together. This like not being able to breathe the air certainly would tie everyone together. Like they'll have a shared experience, and yet they still are living their own lives and having to deal with this.
I was talking to my brother about this after he had read it. He had never read it either. And we're talking about how, how prophetic it seems to when it was written. And his comment was, and not to downplay any of your forethought, he said, it could just be a commentary on how predictable we are as a society. That you could think about, what if there was an airborne virus like this? How would society react? What would those stages be? And maybe if you put some thought in that, you're thinking, well, what would the general worst case be? Because we're talking about society as a whole. It's probably going to go down that path. It would probably be like A, B, C, and D. And then that's what you put in your book. And then when it actually happened in real life, we followed those steps exactly.
Yeah.
It's the idea of
very predictable.
Yeah. Which is on some level kind of sad and depressing, but
Yeah.
at the you're right. It is a matter of you just you take that idea and see how that would spin out. You're hitting the kind of human condition we'd have, but you have this group here of characters, and I do want to come back to that after this though. But before we leave Breathers, I know I read your post on your site about your experience with It's Alive and how that kind of went, and a buddy of ours, Mike and ours, who shops at our shop, had been getting, I think he had a sign up or pledge to the Kickstarter, I think, and he was saying that as that went along, some of the issues that you had brought up about fulfillment and whatnot, he was having problems getting that as well. So that was experience from a customer as well. So I wonder, it didn't seem like in the end that was the most positive experience in terms of maybe on a communication end or things like that. But
Yeah, it was very, very frustrating as
and
it went on.
Yeah, and you get that in your post there. So I'm wondering,
Yeah.
has that changed or formed what your relationship to larger publishers or publishers in general are, or do you see that as more of an isolated thing? Because obviously the book came out through Dark Horse, which I guess that was a deal that might have been in place while It's Alive was coming. And
Yes.
then Tin Man came out on
Yes.
Amulet through Abrams. So you work with publishers as well. So has that experience with It's Alive changed how you think maybe certain types of publishing may work for you?
Yeah, when I agreed to work with It's Alive, I really felt like I didn't have another option to get Breathers out, and like, well, at this point, I've just got my black and white Xerox books, so we can do something in color and have more distribution. I was like, yeah, let's go for it. So it seemed like a good idea at the time, as a lot of things do.
Sure.
But I mean, it eventually amounted to the Dark Horse deal. So
I guess in the end it worked out,
and it worked out. It's just
yeah.
a couple of years of aggravation, and
It definitely seemed that way. So I guess, I mean, in the end, you have a really nice bound book, coming out on Dark Horse, something that people know. I mean, I know It's Alive didn't have the biggest, kind of range, but I mean, more than self-publishing. So something on Dark Horse with that emblem on the side, there's something that
beautiful
comes
thing.
with it. Yeah.
And if it's any consolation, had you gotten your dream gig and been working on this book for Vertigo in that time, they also would have shut up shop before the book came out in its final form. So, by the way, I'm so curious. So the way I discovered your book, which I think is, I say this probably more than any other sentence on the podcast, is that you had a Jeff Lemire variant. And how in the world did you get Jeff Lemire to
Jeff
do
Lemire
a
and
variant?
Matt Kent.
And Matt Kent, right?
Yeah, Matt did the watercolor on it. So that was, the publisher at It's Alive kind of asked me if we were to do a variant cover, who would you want to do it? And I dropped those two names.
Wow.
So he reached out to them, and then they wanted to read it first, of course, to see
Yeah.
something they'd want to be associated with, and they did. And then they agreed
That's
to
high
do
praise too. Yeah.
It was
definitely
a highlight of everything I've done. I was like,
well, you may be able to tell, I have a little bit of a style. I've got some of your art on my wall. I've got a page from Royal City from Jeff Lemire, and on this wall that's behind the screen, I've got a page of Mind Management by Matt Kent. So I'm like, I have a style. Like there's a certain aesthetic to comics that just automatically reels me in. Not exclusively, but I'm just like, oh, I love that, because
guys are great, and like coming up and doing shows, and when they were at Top Shelf, I was like, that was where I wanted to be.
Okay,
so
sure.
I had actually pitched Breathers to Top Shelf, and it was like, I felt like it was kind of close, but never quite worked out.
I mean, you'd be up there. I mean, that's Top Shelf put out. That was Essex County came out on Top Shelf.
Yeah.
And Blankets, right? Blankets was Top Shelf?
Maybe.
I think it was initially, yeah.
I mean, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. That's great though. I mean, because I think for not even just the lay person though, they look at Breathers, and I think maybe not knowing you or your worth, they're going to look at that, and most people are going to be like, "That looks a lot like Jeff Lemire. It looks a lot like Matt Kinn." I mean, there's a through line there in terms of style. So, I mean, for them to get that, and I mean, for you to throw those names out there, and then to have those guys collaborate on something, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So I mentioned before we went on the It's Alive, the idea of that Mike brought up. Breathers is about, it's this, 9 issues, 400 some odd plus pages, but we've got half a dozen ish characters that the whole thing focuses on. And looking at that and looking at your other work like Tin Man or Carbon, you seem to have that same style of setup where we're focusing on a small group of characters, that, the book is kind of about how they interact, how they're related to each other, and all that. But it's a much larger world, but you're focusing on sin, and not necessarily it isn't like a found family thing in some ways. It's just, you got a small cast of characters, and you're using them to tell your story and explore your world. Is that something, a story construction that you're just comfortable with in terms of how to distribute and tell your stories, or is it just, I'm curious where that comes from and why that's such a through line?
I think I just like to put as much in a book as I possibly can. So
Yeah.
the more characters I put in, the more fun I can have, I guess. I don't know. I like just relationships between people, whether it be brother, sister, or uncle and niece, or just, friends, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's just always fascinating to work a dynamic between people.
It's about character at that point. Yeah.
It's about character. Yeah.
There's
stuff going on, but I mean, it's still.
Well,
yeah, like you said, Breathers, there's the world they live in, this airborne virus, but it's not really about that. It's about how these characters interact in that world. So, yeah.
Yeah. So there's one particular of the stuff going on that I'm curious about. I mean, I don't want you to reveal more than you intended to in writing it. But in general, I would call this a very grounded story, and perhaps it feels more grounded now because of world events. Maybe in 2007, it was far-fetched. But it all feels very grounded, very real. The characters aren't really like sexy or super intelligent or, I mean, anything. They're regular people, aside from a flying dragon.
Oh yeah, that.
Yeah, the dragon part. Yeah. I don't know how much, Mike, did we talk about this much?
I take it.
Yeah, I
no, we didn't really, because
we didn't.
I took it kind of non-literally, or like it was like, I don't know, a shared like drug side effect. That being said, the dragon did seem to do some moderately heavy lifting plot-wise. So if you want the reader to be ambiguous about it, by all means, keep it that way. But anything you're willing to say about the dragon, I would love to hear.
Oh boy. I really did want to just kind of leave it up to.
Yeah. Did you have a stuffed dragon from your childhood?
Yeah.
Well, I think.
Is it that simple?
Mara was, I imagine it would be pretty difficult to live in that world. And
I mean,
I don't know. It seemed natural that she would have this dragon to talk to.
I thought it was very uncool when the dragon got left behind.
Initially with Mara, like, I think it's a Calvin and Hobbes situation, which makes sense for anyone who had a stuffed animal best friend, kind of that makes sense. But then when it progresses out and now multiple people are seeing the dragon. I mean, Juliana sees it, Easter sees it. And then there's the through line of Juliana has a dragon tattoo on her arm, right? And I think and Easter has the pendant, and the doctor says something about the importance of the dragon. But seeing the dragon there and have that people recognize it as like, oh, that's like actually a dragon. Like they're seeing the platonic ideal of a dragon when we think of a dragon. So your intent, you're saying, was you wanted those moments to be, because I mean, in terms of like the supernatural,
we like the characters question, am I seeing a dragon right now?
Yeah.
It's just sort of just like this, everything's kind of a little mundane in the world, I mean, so to speak. Then you have this like dragon pop up. sort of, just throws this kind of outside element into the story that, maybe no one was expecting.
Well, yeah,
Maybe
most certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well,
it made sense at the time.
no, no, no. I totally dig it. I mean, and to
Cool.
me, it's not unlike, and these are all works that came later, mind you, but it's not unlike several things that Jeff Lemire has done. I think of like the Minotaur in May's book,
Oh, yeah.
or uh, I mean, what's the current one? Fish Flies.
Sure. Mm.
So, I think, or even my favorite book of all time, The Underwater Welder, where he kind of has like that hallucination fever dream through the town and is kind of interacting with his childhood self. And it's like, well, are we to take this as like something supernatural happening, or this was just kind of a therapeutic self-discovery fever dream? And Jeff like has no interest in answering that. Like, I mean, he's like, no, I told the story. Like,
Yeah.
you do the work.
Or you,
Um,
whatever you want to think about it. Yeah.
Sure.
yeah,
It,
no,
it can,
I
it
think
can mean
that's
what you want it to
perfectly
mean.
I think
valid.
it's fun to sort of leave, a few things unexplained.
Mhm.
You know.
Yes,
Well,
I completely agree.
it does. It adds that little bit of supernatural fantasy element to the world that we think of as our world, and especially now, knowing that
Yeah.
like these things could happen, and yeah, because it is fundamentally our world. Just with high, slightly elevated stakes in there, and then all of a sudden there's this dragon. There's this idea that wait, are we actually seeing this or not? And I know I like that. I like that. So I guess without answering, did it have a meaning for you, or was it just something you wanted to throw in there because you had a sense of what it might feel like? You felt it was additive to the world. Did it have a specific meaning for you, in terms of what it represented? That that was just for you, the creator of it.
Uh, in a way, yes. I think
Okay.
I don't know, when it's hard to articulate it, but yeah, I think like when I decided to do it, it was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
It felt right, right? The vibes
It
were right.
felt right. Yeah,
Yeah.
just the way things had led up
Mm.
to that point.
Yeah,
Sure, sure.
I'm looking through all the covers. I'm pretty sure I have them all, and I don't think there are any with a big dragon on the cover. Meaning, it's like it's
No.
you really buried the lead there. It's like,
Well, it's not
which
about
is
the dragon.
well, exactly. No, I mean, but I think it's one of those things that kind of guided my interpretation. Yeah, the only dragon on the cover is that single issue,
Mhm.
which the stuffing is coming out of his neck, which is not a strong, intimidating dragon. So I think to me it was like, well, clearly that's not a real dragon. That that's not really happening because this is such a grounded world. These characters are also like gritty and hard worn. But yeah. So anyway, yeah, I did not mean to. I didn't want to make you talk about something that you intentionally didn't talk about. So I think you've humored us quite a bit there.
I did want to ask about Tin Man, which after I read Breathers, I went and read Tin Man, which I
Mhm.
thoroughly enjoyed. It's a really fun, sweet book. But the thing that popped out at me is after reading it,
Mhm.
I read kind of the synopses and like the solicitation or whatnot, and I have it written here, which described as equal parts the Iron Giant, the Wizard of Oz, Edward Scissorhands, and Freaks and Geeks. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, like I can see those things like almost exactly how the story is divided. Obviously, the Wizard of Oz is the overall thing.
Mhm.
There are a ton of little Easter. I mean, outside of the fact that you have Campbell, who is essentially the Tin Woodsman, but the town itself, abbreviated to OZ. There was the Flying Monkey Taco Truck,
Right.
and I think that there were two girls. One of them was named Galinda. I think like there was little things there. Those are obvious. And then when I thought about the story there, it's like, okay, the Iron Giant, that's the Fenn and Campbell story. So
Yeah.
for people who haven't read Tin Man, it focuses around this brother and sister, Solar, who is about to graduate high school, her younger brother Fen, and they come across and they meet the Tin Woodsman from The Wizard of Oz named Campbell. So the relationship between Fen and Campbell is very much the Iron Giant, and then you see the relationship between Campbell and Solar. I mean, that's Edward Scissorhands. And then the relationship between Solar and Fen is Freaks and Geeks. I mean, like Solar is like, she is Lindsay Ware. I mean, down to the her boyfriend makes the quip about putting on the army jacket.
Yeah.
And I read that before having read the synopses there and thought like that. I mean, like in my mind, it's like that's got to be a Freaks and Geeks thing, which is a wonderful show that I love. So I'm curious, as you were putting that book together, are those and to me those things, those themes, those elements ring out so specifically in the story, and I love how they mesh together. But when you're in them, they seem very discrete and very separate. Were you thinking about that as you were writing those relationships? Are those references that you had in your mind, like specifically, or is it just, I mean, they are kind of archetypal in terms of how those relationships between those types of characters work. So was it more general, or are those things that you are like, pieces of work that you're fans of that you're trying to?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm fans of all that, that you mentioned. Yeah. But, I wasn't trying to, directly, copy.
Yeah. But in your mind,
but it was
like
there. Yeah.
The reference of like, the older sister going off trying to rebel and her younger brother, it naturally falls into something like Freaks and Geeks for you, like that.
Right. That was where my mind was going as far as like developing that relationship.
Where did the story start? Did it start on the idea of like this kind of outside whimsical tale set in the world of like, quote unquote, set in the world of Oz? Like, was that the basis of the idea and the story worked from there? Or did the Oz part and the Tin Woodsman part come in later? Like, was it a story about this brother and sister, this family?
It actually started as more of a story about Campbell, the Tin Man, and Fen.
Okay.
Like,
so more the Iron Giant side, kind of.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then as I kept working on it, I was working on that as I was working on Carbon, kind of simultaneously. So as I was working on Tin Man, it just sort of like it became something more than just that relationship between the boy and the Tin Man.
Yeah.
Once I, introduced the sister, and just it grew into something different, which I really liked. Like at first I was just kind of doing it as something fun. It's like, I'm not sure if this is going to go anywhere.
Was it kind of like a break from doing Carbon? I mean, you're not often working on multiple projects at one time.
No, this was like, Carbon was pretty heavy and the darker tone of things. So
it started as kind of a break, mental break.
Yeah. And then, once I was more in the story, I was like, I really like this, and I think this is it's gonna be really cool. So
I think Tin Man's a really fun book to read. The nice kind of coming. I guess it's qualified under like a kind of a YA coming of age story. So if you're out there listening, it was published through Amulet, which is it's an imprint of Abrams Comics or Abrams Arts, which does a whole bunch of great comic work. I know they published the Night Eaters books by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takada, which I really, really love. And so I think I assume Amulet maybe is like a YA all ages kind of imprint specific for them.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I think it fits that vibe perfectly. So yeah, if you can find it out in a bookstore, bookshop, or whatever, a comic book shop, read it to the library or whatever, I think Tin Man's a really fun kind of coming of age, heartwarming story. So I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Thanks.
And you said our library has that, right, Alex?
Yes. Yeah. I initially
Cincinnati library.
Yeah.
Representing.
No, actually, no. Sorry. I'm in the county to the north, so I don't know if Cincinnati Public Library has it. My library system has it.
Yeah, our library's better than yours.
Well, I don't know. Do they have Tin Man? If they don't, then maybe not.
I'm pretty sure they do.
My library does. So yeah.
Sorry. Before we got into pissing match about libraries.
Right.
You were about to say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say like uh having kids and wanting them to maybe read something that I've done. It
Mhm.
was kind of why I started Tin Man also. I was like,
I think you
they can't read breathers just yet. So it's like,
that's
Yes.
interesting you say that. I think you hear that a lot from artists of all kinds.
mhm,
I mean, the number of actors who will be like, "I did this because my kid liked the thing,"
yeah.
and it's the first thing I can be in where they can watch it now and don't have
Mhm.
to wait
Right.
15 years for them to see it or something like that.
Yeah.
So that played a role in terms of
Oh yeah.
maybe not in the generation idea, but the idea of as you got into the story, this idea of having this
Y-
book that all ages can read, anyone can read and
Right.
connect with. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I don't know if you'd give them breathers or carbon. They're a little heavier.
Not just
Right.
yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Got to wait a few years for you hand those down
Yeah.
there. So yeah, Tin Man, I think is a perfect read for something like that. Yeah. Mike, your daughter's probably still a little too young, given that she probably
She's
can't read yet. We're still working on the actual reading and the talking part.
Yeah, she's 18 months old. She's got her letters, she knows a lot of words,
All right.
but she can count. Um, and she recognizes her name. So
That's good.
if we use
And
the fridge
Batman too,
magnets.
right? Does she
Oh yeah,
recognize
she knows
Batman?
Batman. Wait, no,
Okay.
I mean she recognizes characters like all day, but like literally the refrigerator letters. If we put Anya, Anya, she'll say Anya and point to herself. And I'm
Wow.
like, I know it's technically only 3 letters she learned, but she learned a sequence of 4, which
That is
seems pretty impressive. I don't know. Um, I may be biased there. In terms of
maybe
what's
a little
impressive.
bit.
But
Yeah.
yeah, well, it's great that you made something good while using the excuse for your kids, because I think Eddie Murphy made bad movies for like 20 years straight and blamed his kids for it. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I
Right.
actually think you've maybe done more damage to your children by blaming them publicly for 20 years than you ever would have done from showing them Beverly Hills Cop. Um, so I don't know. I think kid of any age would find a banana tailpipe funny.
Yeah. That's
Anyway,
universal.
anyway, uh, what what is it that aside from going to your website, buying prints, buying books of stuff that's already out, how do people continue to support you as a creator? I don't think you do like Patreon or uh, like
Don't.
Kickstarters, things like that.
No, it's pretty much just my web store and
Okay.
you know, people
Buying
pick
books, buying
books,
prints.
buy
I gotta
books.
be
Yeah.
honest though, like I your prints were very affordable and they're incredible. I've got the 3 little 5x7s back there,
Mhm.
which fit beautifully next to each other in a 3 5x7 frame. That's great. In terms of future comics, can you give us any
Yeah.
indication on whether you're still working on something and what you might be working on, or where it might be coming from, where we can look for it, or when?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a couple things. I've actually started a sequel to Breathers, as crazy as that's.
Ooh.
Oh,
I,
So,
oh,
I,
okay.
wow.
You
Okay.
have
Well,
my
I will
interest.
say, yeah, I'm super interested. Although the cardinal rule of our podcast is that we only cover series that are completed, and now
Yeah,
right.
you're
yeah,
gonna you're gonna
yeah.
make liars of
I'll
us.
see you in 6 years.
Yes.
You know what? You know what? Deal,
Book
deal.
it.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, so
Uh,
you're working on that right now.
So
Did
yeah, I just yeah, I don't know. I hadn't really thought I'd ever do a sequel to it,
Mhm.
and then I don't know, a few months ago, I just had this couple thoughts pop into my head
yeah. When you get
of
the idea.
Yeah.
storylines that would be really cool, and just started digging into it.
So okay. And if you can't give it away, you can't give it away. Is it a
Mhm.
sequel to the World of Breathers? Like this is the like post-vaccination world rebuilding, coming back together, or is it a sequel to the characters of Breathers? Obviously, if you're doing the characters, it would also be the world. But is it
Yeah,
a totally new cast?
there'll be a couple new characters, and then I plan on bringing Toby and Easter and
Okay.
Hut and
Okay.
Mara
Okay.
back. So it'll be 20 years after the Breathers
The
book.
original, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying it would be
It's gonna
20
be a
years
big
after you made the one
Well,
in 2007.
yeah, almost.
I was like,
Actually, we're butting up on that. We're getting close there. So, okay, now that is tantalizing and fascinating. Yeah.
So I'm not sure, where that's going to end up going.
Okay. All right. All right. All right.
yeah.
I'd like to go with Dark Horse again. We'll see. We'll see.
Hey, that'd be great. Hey, so
Yeah.
if you're out there and you're listening to this,
has his imprint there now.
I'm saying just go buy the completed breathers. Let's go out and buy that at Dark Horse so we can make sure we get this out on Dark Horse. Now my mind is now racing of like when you said 20 years after the end of the book. Now I'm thinking, okay.
To be clear, Alex, I don't think he's asking either of us for our pitches.
Oh no,
it's gonna be very hard to contain them, but
I know I can't help it. But my mind is going thinking like, oh, okay, so 20 years after, what does that word look like? And now that's a fascinating idea because I got to the end of the book, and it's not that I'm thinking like I don't want more of the story there. You get to the end of the breathers, and there's closure there, and there is the idea that obviously the whole point is I think. The world goes on. The world can quite literally the world can now continue in a way that's closer to how it was prior to this airborne virus coming out. But I hadn't thought about the idea of like what specifics would be, and it didn't seem like that was something that you might have been interested in. I guess it sounds like you weren't until
it wasn't
until you were until all of a sudden you were
right.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you said you had that. That's in the works. You said you have maybe something else that you were working on.
I'm working on another all ages story.
Okay, all right.
It's actually kind of a take on a Winnie the Pooh story.
Oh, like 100 Acre Wood kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's about a 12-year-old girl who goes with her mother. There's some abuse that they're getting away from, so they moved to this this girl's uncle's house, which is like on the outskirts of the 100 Acre Woods.
So I guess
it
would
sounds
that be another kind of graphic novel?
Miyazaki as well.
Like,
it does sound like the opening 10 minutes of a Miyazaki film.
Would that be? Is that another graphic novel? Like
yeah.
And would the Breather sequel potentially be like periodic? Would that be also broken up in issues? Are you thinking of that way as well? Or?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, that is something to. I mean, both those sound fantastic. I said after seeing what you did with Tin Man, that idea of kind of being tangential related, the idea of going into the Winnie the Pooh universe there.
Yeah, it seemed like a natural kind of follow up to Tin Man.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. That sounds great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's important to remember that if you really want to do something family friendly, this year you can celebrate by using the now public domain version of Mickey Mouse.
Right.
Just do whatever you want. Just have them on every page just for the heck of it.
All of a sudden Steamboat Willie shows up. It's there. Oh, that's awesome.
As we can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you
just tempt those Disney lawyers to come after you.
You can't afford not to because it's public domain. So
right.
Anyway, okay, so the best way to support you is to keep an eye on Dark Horse, obviously. Buy everything you've already made.
Yes.
And you've got a newsletter, correct? Or a blog?
I guess you could call it a blog. I don't know. Okay. I have a website that I
when you want to sell us a new story.
And there are updates going up there for you're posting pages of Carbon, right? That are right? Yeah. So there's ongoing, reason to come back, follow the story there. If you haven't gone and bought, what is Carbon, like 600 some odd pages? Or? Yeah,
that's right.
Carbon's pretty hefty. There. So, but yeah, no, go and support Justin any way you can. Because I got to tell you, I really got to read these other two books. From what you said, they have to come out in some form because I gotta read what you have coming up. Those sound fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll
just keep working on stuff. So
it'll
eventually be done.
Keep chugging away at it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You got it.
And I think you still sell some of these older ones too, right? Like Happy Town.
Oh my God.
1 and 2.
Wow.
That's still on the site, right?
Those I don't make anymore.
No. Oh wow. And then
those are out of print.
Okay.
You got all the goodies.
Well, look, I assume you put this box together, this Just Mad box.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and it was, I mean, it's a steal. I don't, it was so much story for $30.
Yeah.
And my
It was a
comic
different
shop,
time.
yeah, like a comic shop that I go to had that, and I was like, wait, that's the Breathers guy. And this back when I had like maybe 2 issues of Breathers waiting for it to come out, and
Mhm.
it's alive at a slow crawl. And I was like, oh, I know that guy. I know that art. Plus, even if I didn't, that type of art draws me in. I was like, $30. And I was like, and I see that it's got a Breathers in here. So I was like, yeah, I'm all over that. So $30 well spent by all
Pretty
means.
good score.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty good.
Just making it just Mad Box Volume 2. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'll read unfinished story ideas that you have just if you release little sketchbooks and stuff. I do think that's a thing that people do on like their Substacks and whatnot is like,
Well,
here's
yeah, like
something I
the
messed
work in
around with.
progress stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then finally, you do take commissions as well?
I do, yes.
Okay. I was gonna say I've never commissioned anything. I've just
Mhm.
got everything else and some prints. I always get
Yeah,
anxiety
commissions
about
are
issuing a
are
commission.
are fun and challenging, but that's good.
And that contact through the website, through that way.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Awesome.
Well, you'll
Awesome.
know that it's Alex and I pitching
Mhm.
Breathers 20 years later when our commissions are really specific and they keep coming in a sequential order.
Right.
I want to know. I mean, yeah, my biggest question is I want to know what happened to the professor who, like, using modern analogs. It's like
Mhm.
the guy, it's like, imagine if you found out the founder of QAnon was a psych professor at Harvard who was like, I just wanted to push buttons and see what it would do.
Right.
And I also kind of take credit for fixing everything.
Mhm.
Yeah. By
But I'm like,
claiming none of it was real. Yeah.
right. But when you break people's brains conspiratorially like that, I always wonder like what the road back looks like, what the recovery is, or if they just stay down that path and they're like, oh, well, that person's,
Mhm.
they're no longer a true believer, but I am, even though the person who created the belief doesn't believe in it anymore.
Yeah.
So that's the story that I'm really curious about. But
Yeah,
I'll
there'll
read,
be
I'll
some
read
of
whatever
that
you
in
want to
there.
tell me. Okay.
Yeah, no, that will be addressed.
Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. No,
yeah.
if you get a commission from me, it would probably be it'd be Death of the Endless.
Oh yeah. Nice.
Prince and issues with all the Endless are a thing for me. So I guess the last thing here, we thought, reach the website, follow you there, support your work or whatnot. So this will be coming out at the end of March, when it kind of fun as we're recording here, which would be about a month before C2E2 in Chicago.
Great.
And I saw your name on the guest list there. So our con appearances are things you're doing or have done a little bit here and there?
Yeah, starting to get back into it. I used to do a lot more,
Mm.
pre-kids.
Yeah, I've
But
got
yeah,
that pampered schedule a bit.
I'm
So.
in Wisconsin, so
Oh.
Chicago's not too far away.
All right. So if you're listening to this now and you're thinking about
Yeah,
going to Chicago,
C2E2.
yeah, I know I'm thinking about getting up there. So if I am, I'll definitely swing
Yeah.
by and say hi. So but yeah, so
Somewhere in Artist Alley.
yeah, well that is when I go to shows, I don't venture out of Artist Alley. I spend all my
There's
time
so
there.
much there.
I spent all my time as creators. Doesn't matter how big show like C2E2 or New York Comic Con, which I've been to once, or like a small local show that Mike and I just went to down in Lexington. I whatever their Artist Alley is, where all the creators are, I'm walking in circles around there, and then.
Yeah.
When all that's spent, then maybe it's like, oh, they're vendors and stuff. There's other
I
stuff
think-
here,
Which is
There's other
why
stuff I
you
can
and
take a
I
look
are
at.
like done at like 4:30 p.m. on Friday.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
we take Friday off
Yeah.
work, we go in at noon.
Yeah.
We like get our books signed, talk to artists as much as we can, and in about 4 or 5 hours, you could be tapped out at a mid-sized show like that.
Yeah. So that is if you're in Chicago for C2E2, go fun around. Justin will be there. I'll probably be there. Hopefully I'll be there. I want to try to make it out there.
I've got like a whole suitcase of books to send with you for Justin to sign.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll make that happen there. So,
Great.
Mike, do you have anything else?
No, that is everything. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
I
thank
promised
you.
we wouldn't take more than an hour, and we're right at an hour. So
Oh, perfect.
We appreciate the time. Thank you, Justin. This was a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
thank you.
we'll reach out in a few years for
Yep.
whatever
Breeders 2.
Breeders Part 2 is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Breeders a sequel.
I'll,
Yep.
I'll keep you posted.
Breeders Back in the Heaven. I think that's the name. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.